Let's talk about guilt. In family constellations, guilt is a sign of loyalty, also in family systems and marriage and family therapy theories. Every family or culture, religion, or nation has hidden loyalties, unspoken rules about what's acceptable, who belongs, and how love is shown. These rules are often inherited from past generations, shaped by trauma, loss, and survival strategies. When you start living differently, speaking your truth, setting boundaries, leaving dysfunction, you break those rules and you feel it in your body. It doesn't feel good, it feels bad. That doesn't mean it is bad. In the system's eyes, this can feel like betrayal. Internally, you may feel guilt even though you're doing something healthy. Healthy versus unhealthy guilt. Unhealthy guilt is feeling wrong for taking care of yourself, thriving, or being different from the family norm. Healthy guilt is a natural signal that you're breaking old patterns, which is actually necessary for healing. So Bert Hellinger, the founder of Family Constellations, often said, if you want to grow, you must be willing to endure guilt. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. You just have to get comfortable with it or figure out how to let it go. The hidden trap. Many people unconsciously choose loyalty over life, staying small, unhappy, or self-sacrificing to avoid the guilt of stepping out of the system's pattern. This is especially true for martyrs who later become scapegoats. You may have chosen to carry the family's pain so they wouldn't have to, and when you stop, the guilt can feel unbearable. So let's talk about scapegoats and martyrs. A martyr chooses or feels compelled to suffer, sacrifice, or endure hardship for a cause, belief, or another person. They're often seen as self-sacrificing and may do so voluntarily, though sometimes unconsciously, to gain love, approval, or moral high ground. The narrative is, I'll take this pain so you don't have to. In relationships, martyrdom can be unhealthy if it's rooted in self-abandonment or silent resentment. But in family constellations, we have noticed that children will sacrifice themselves for the love of the parent. They will abandon their boundaries for blind love. The scapegoat is assigned the blame for problems, often unjustly by a group or a system. Usually doesn't choose the role, it's imposed to protect others from facing their own flaws, guilt, or dysfunction. The narrative is, it's your fault, you're the problem. In family systems, the scapegoat often carries the unspoken conflicts of the whole group. They're often called the identified patient, and they can be the most caring person in the family, willing to take on symptoms like addiction, suicide, or suicidal tendencies to feel for the family when the family can't feel something. So the key difference is the martyr, it's an internal choice, even if subconscious, to suffer for others. And the scapegoat is an external assignment of blame to preserve the group's illusion of harmony. The overlap happens when someone starts as a martyr, I'll take the hit for the family, and ends up as a scapegoat. Now everything is your fault. That's a pattern I've seen a lot in family systems and relationships, and that actually was what happened to me and my family. So entering as a martyr, you show up with a big heart, empathy, and a willingness to carry others' pain so they can feel better. You might take on responsibility for everyone's emotional climate, smoothing conflicts, absorbing hurt, and making sacrifices to keep the peace. This can make you the emotional glue of the family or relationship. The shift towards scapegoat. Over time, your very presence and truth become inconvenient because you're too awake to tolerate dysfunction silently. When you start showing cracks, setting small boundaries, speaking up, or even just struggling to keep holding it all, people who rely on your self-sacrifice feel threatened. To protect themselves from looking at their own shadow, they project blame onto you. You're the problem. This flips your role from our savior to our burden. Why boundaries felt impossible. As a martyr, your identity was tied to being the good one, the strong one, so saying no felt like abandoning your role, or maybe even your self-worth. In a system where love and belonging were tied to self-sacrifice, boundaries could feel like a threat to survival. The cost. You end up carrying both the weight of responsibility, martyr, and the weight of blame, the scapegoat, a double bind that drains your spirit. From a family constellation's perspective, what happened is that you were unconsciously serving the system at your own expense. The system rewarded you at first through praise, love, and inclusion, but then turned when you stopped serving its hidden agreements. This also mirrors what is happening collectively. On a global scale, humanity has a long history of martyr scapegoat cycles. When we repress our shame or guilt, we don't make it disappear, we push it underground into the shadow where it gets exploited or warped. Okay, so back to loyalty. Transformation. In constellations work, the shift comes when you can see the pattern. This guilt isn't because I'm wrong, it's because I'm stepping into my own life. Acknowledge the loyalty, honoring your family, culture, or ancestors for what they gave you, and allowing yourself to live differently. You can ask them to bless you for making different choices. Take your rightful place, standing as a separate, sovereign adult who can love the system without repeating its wounds. So a constellation's mantra about guilt: I will carry this guilt if it means I can live my own life, and in doing so, I honor you. Okay. So that's why it's so hard to shift out of this. That's why it's so hard to do something different and to break the cycle. But guilt is not the truth. Loyalty or illusion. Loyalty, guilt from a family constellations lens. On the human systemic level, guilt is often a loyalty conflict. When we listen to the truth of our spirit, we are usually stepping outside the unspoken agreements of the larger human family. Agreements that were created for survival, not truth. In a small family system, this might mean not carrying a parent's pain, refusing to enable dysfunction. In the world system, it can mean refusing to hate the enemy your culture says you should hate. Questioning political, religious, or economic norms. Living in joy and abundance when the unspoken agreement is to suffer in solidarity. Why it feels disloyal. The human family has long survived through conformity, believing the same myths and obeying the same rules. Choosing spirit over the collective ego feels like leaving the tribe, which on a survival level is terrifying. This fear shows up as guilt. If I follow spirit, I'm abandoning my people. Illusion guilt through a Course in Miracles lens. ACIM. At the spiritual absolute level, guilt is entirely an illusion. The ego says, you've left God, you're separate, you've betrayed love itself. This original guilt is a trick. Separation never happened. When you listen to your spirit, you are actually undoing the illusion of separation. But the ego interprets it as betrayal because it's a betrayal of it. So the ego screams, you're wrong, you're selfish, you're hurting others, to pull you back into its story. How we're disloyal when listening to spirit. As we see the world as one giant family system, listening to spirit can look like breaking inherited agreements. We stay small so no one feels jealous. We sacrifice ourselves for the greater good. We don't question authority. Refusing to carry the collective shadow, not taking on the hatred, fear, or revenge cycles that keep the system in place. Choosing love over loyalty, loving all sides, forgiving enemies, healing across divisions. Living in joy and sovereignty, which the collective may resent because it exposes the possibility of freedom that they're not ready to claim. From the system's point of view, this is betrayal. From spirit's point of view, this is liberation. And then what does The Art of Selfishness say about guilt? That is a book that I was reading, The Art of Selfishness. Self-care as liberation from guilt. Seabury challenges the assumption that putting yourself first is inherently selfish, and by extension, shameful. He illustrates through simple striking anecdotes, like the wife who altered her family's behavior by acting selfish, that asserting personal needs liberates rather than harms the system. Boundaries dissolve guilt. Setting healthy selfish boundaries, like saying no to draining obligations or choosing self-care over people-pleasing, is presented as a radical act of self-respect, not moral failure. Okay, so that first one comes from I Don't Like to Read. And this one comes from thegodly.com, I Don't Like to Read. Guilt stems from overcompromise. On Goodreads, readers highlight Seabury's teaching. There is nothing wrong with taking care of your needs before those of others, and that selfish in some way is necessary for your own emotional health. Goodreads. Why guilt falls away under this perspective? Because self-neglect creates resentment. By subverting personal needs to please others, we sow the seeds of both inner burnout and guilt-laden resentment. Embracing the art of selfishness allows wellness, not shame, to become the default. Because authenticity outlives obligation. When you honor your real desires rather than acting out of compulsion, you disrupt the ego's voice that insists you should feel guilty for choosing yourself. And often, it is in the highest good of everybody. Our value isn't conditional. By choosing self-care unapologetically, you affirm that your worth isn't tied to endless service or martyrdom, but to your innate being. Okay. So now you can see why it's so hard to listen to your spirit. And there's a lot of working against you. You're going to feel a lot working against you, a lot of pressure for you not to do that, and feeling bad and feeling guilty. That's what you're going to feel when you're breaking the cycles of this system that we're in right now. And in order to get to heaven on earth, which is what we're trying to create, or the new earth, you need to be able to go through this. You're going to have to experience this. If you want a loving, peaceful, joyful environment for you and your children to live in, this is what we need to do. This is the path to freedom. So I'm going to be talking more about the path to freedom. And if you like this video, please like and subscribe and let me know where you are on your journey and if you can relate to this.